Nobody thought she could actually pull it off against a mastermind defense designed specifically to embarrass her on national television. But the reality of professional basketball is that true greatness often requires walking through absolute fire. When Caitlin Clark stepped onto the professional hardwood for her rookie season, she didn't just bring a legion of dedicated fans and record-breaking television ratings. She dragged a massive, unavoidable target on her back that had every veteran and defensive coach in the league plotting her absolute downfall. For months leading up to this exact moment, the basketball world was overflowing with whispers, rumors, and straight-up speculations that the established stars of the WNBA were actively coordinating to physically and mentally break the rookie phenom. You could see it in the cheap shots during early games, the excessively aggressive fouls that almost crossed the line into entirely different territory, and the constant media disrespect from former players claiming her college success was nothing but an overhyped fluke that would be exposed the second she played against grown women. The narrative was firmly set in stone by the critics who swore that she would hit a massive rookie wall, and opposing teams were foaming at the mouth for the chance to be the ones to permanently build that wall. Behind closed doors, locker rooms were allegedly buzzing with a jealous energy, fueled by massive sneaker deals and unprecedented media attention that many veterans felt they had earned but never received. This wasn't just about basketball anymore. It was a deeply personal, highly publicized psychological war, and the pressure was suffocating as the lights grew brighter with every single matchup. But what the critics completely underestimated was the sheer terrifying willpower of a player who thrives on being backed into a corner and disrespected by the very peers she grew up idolizing. The stage was finally set for a massive collision between the most hyped rookie in sports history and a coaching staff that outright refused to become just another viral highlight reel on social media. But that wasn't the whole story, because the person actively designing the trap to humiliate the Fever star was a tactical genius who rarely made mistakes and had spent a lifetime proving her own doubters wrong. Enter Natalie Nakase, a brilliant, relentless basketball mind who spent years grinding through the grueling ranks of professional coaching, breaking barriers, and dissecting the exact mechanics of the greatest players on the planet. She wasn't just any assistant coach handed a clipboard. She was a defensive architect who had spent time in the NBA system, working with the Los Angeles Clippers and absorbing high-level analytical strategies that she brought directly to the WNBA. Nas knew exactly how to exploit a player's deepest weaknesses, and she had spent countless sleepless nights watching hours of tape on Clark, studying her exact tendencies, her frustration points, and exactly how she reacted when the physical pressure cranked up to a suffocating level. The game plan she engineered wasn't just a standard defensive rotation to guard Caitlin. It was a full-blown psychological operation designed to frustrate her, trap her aggressively off every single pick and roll, and force her to give up the ball to teammates who the defense believed simply couldn't handle the heat of the moment. In the tight-knit, secretive coaching circles of the league, the rumors were flying that Nakase had finally cracked the code, discovering the ultimate defensive formula to neutralize the deep threes and chaotic, fast-paced playmaking that made the rookie so incredibly lethal. Going into this highly anticipated matchup, the tension inside the arena was thick enough to cut with a knife, with fans holding their breath to see if the golden girl of basketball was about to be officially dethroned. The crowd knew exactly what was at stake. The media had their high-definition cameras locked onto Clark's every facial expression, and the opposing bench looked completely arrogant, confident that they were about to expose the rookie once and for all. And what happened next would shock everyone, because the first half played out exactly like a beautifully orchestrated horror movie for the Indiana Fever. From the literal opening tip-off, it was painfully obvious that the defensive scheme Nas implemented was an absolute suffocating nightmare for Clark and the entire Fever offensive system. Every single time she even looked at the ball, two defenders were instantly invading her personal space, bumping her violently off her preferred spots and denying her any room to even breathe, let alone set her feet for a shot. Nakase's aggressive strategy was working to absolute perfection, forcing incredibly horrid shots, creating chaotic, uncharacteristic turnovers, and making the normally high-octane Fever offense look completely disjointed and entirely lost on the hardwood. You could physically see the frustration boiling over on the court as the rookie tried desperately to force incredibly risky passes through completely impossible defensive windows, resulting in tipped balls, steals, and easy fast breaks going the other way for the opposing team. The veteran defenders were actively taking advantage of the chaos, talking massive amounts of trash directly in Clark's ear, making absolutely sure Caitlin knew that this wasn't college anymore, and that her famous logo shots were a thing of the distant past. Social media platforms were already violently erupting, with the dedicated haters rushing to their keyboards at lightning speed to declare that the hype train had finally permanently derailed, and that the rookie was entirely out of her depth against veterans who knew how to play real physical defense. On the sideline, Nakase and the rest of the opposing coaching staff looked incredibly relaxed, exchanging knowing smiles and confident high fives because their heavily researched master plan was unfolding without a single solitary hitch. It felt like the definitive, undeniable proof that all the vicious rumors about Clark being overrated were finally being validated on a massive national broadcast for the entire world to witness. But things were about to take a dramatic, unprecedented turn, because history has proven that you can only keep a generational, highly motivated talent locked in a cage for so long before they completely break the hinges off the door. While we don't know the exact unfiltered words spoken behind those heavy closed doors, the intense speculations from insiders suggest a fiery no-nonsense reality check took place among the coaching staff and the players. Clark wasn't just battling a brutally effective defense drawn up by a mastermind. She was actively fighting the crushing weight of a league that seemingly wanted to see her publicly fail to validate their own egos. The heavy mental toll of taking literal physical beatings night after night, dealing with the exhausting constant media circus, and hearing established veterans constantly belittle her monumental accomplishments would have completely broken a normal player's spirit. But Clark isn't built with the psychological makeup of a normal player, and the widespread rumors floating around suggest she looked her exhausted teammates directly in the eyes and promised that the second half was going to be a completely different, vastly more violent game in terms of offensive execution. She acutely realized that playing directly into Nakase's aggressive traps was exactly what the defense wanted. So she had to completely shift the entire geometry and pace of the court to make them incredibly uncomfortable. She knew deep down that she needed to shoot from distances they physically couldn't trap without breaking their entire rotation, and pass with a velocity and anticipation they simply couldn't react to in time. The FIBA coaching staff made subtle but incredibly crucial offensive adjustments during those 15 minutes, setting screens slightly higher up the floor and creating complex dummy actions to confuse the relentless defense for just a fraction of a crucial second. The trap was still waiting for her out there on the brightly lit hardwood, but Caitlin was walking back out of that tunnel with a terrifying, ice-cold new level of focus that nobody had seen yet. And what miraculously unfolded over the next 20 minutes of regulation basketball was nothing short of legendary, shifting the entire narrative of the season in the blink of an eye. The very moment the third quarter officially started, something in the atmosphere of the arena shifted violently, as if the air had been completely sucked out of the building. Clark calmly brought the ball up the court, and immediately saw the aggressive double team forming exactly like it had in the miserable first half. But instead of hesitating or retreating, she pulled up from a completely absurd, logic-defying distance and splashed a deep three-pointer right directly in the face of the lunging defender. The stunned crowd let out a massive collective gasp, but that initial shot was just the terrifying warning bell of the avalanche that was about to completely bury the opposing team. Suddenly, the entire pace of the game skyrocketed to a frenetic, uncontrollable level as Clark began threading the needle with lightning-fast passes that seemed to outright defy the basic laws of physics. She was miraculously finding cutting teammates through impossibly tight defensive windows, hitting them perfectly in stride for easy layups that left the defenders spinning in absolute circles. Nakase's previously flawless, highly praised defensive scheme was completely fracturing and collapsing in real time as the rookie rapidly exploited tiny gaps that simply hadn't existed just 20 minutes prior. If the defense desperately pressed up high to stop the devastating deep shot, Clark blew right past them with a lightning-fast first step, completely collapsing the paint and kicking the ball out for wide-open, uncontested looks for her teammates. If they cowardly sagged off even a fraction of a single inch to protect the driving lanes, she made them pay the ultimate price with absolute daggers from well beyond the three-point arc, staring down the bench as the ball snapped through the net. It was a spectacular, deeply breathtaking display of pure offensive mastery that left the opposing, highly confident players looking completely gassed, entirely confused, and desperately searching for answers. The momentum swung so incredibly hard and so incredibly fast that the entire building literally felt like it was shaking from the noise. And the Indiana Fever miraculously went from being buried alive to completely dominating the entire flow of the basketball game. But the most incredible, undeniably satisfying part wasn't just the sheer volume of shots she was hitting. It was the total psychological devastation visibly happening on the opposing sideline. Natalie Nakase stood frozen near the bench, her facial expression rapidly morphing from confident, proud satisfaction to absolute, undeniable, horrifying disbelief as she watched her masterpiece burn to the ground. She had spent countless exhausting hours engineering the absolute perfect defense, an A-tie trap that had worked brilliantly against some of the absolute best, most experienced guards in the world, only to watch a first-year rookie tear it to absolute shreds in a matter of a few brutal minutes. You could actively see the frantic, panicked adjustments being loudly shouted from the sidelines. The desperate rapid-fire substitutions, trying to find absolutely anyone on the roster who could physically slow down the relentless onslaught. But absolutely nothing worked. When a special player enters that elusive, untouchable zone, no amount of brilliant coaching, aggressive strategy, or physical intimidation can stop them. And Clark was putting on an absolute masterclass in completely breaking the competitive spirit of a defense. The television cameras ruthlessly caught the subtle, undeniable signs of sheer panic, veteran defenders throwing their arms up in total frustration. The coaching staff were furiously staring down at their dry erase clipboards, trying to invent an answer that simply didn't exist in the game of basketball. It was a brutal, humbling realization that the meticulous scouting report was completely and utterly useless when faced with a true once-in-a-generation anomaly who could read the floor like a supercomputer. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of Clark's shot selection mixed directly with a terrifying robotic accuracy effectively turned the professional court into her own personal, highly entertaining playground. It was a massive, undeniable statement to every single hater, critic, and fiercely jealous veteran in the entire league that she wasn't just some fabricated media creation propped up by network executives. She was an unstoppable, terrifying force of nature. And this unbelievable reality-bending second-half surge was about to permanently cement a comeback victory that absolutely nobody in the basketball world saw coming. As the final glorious buzzer loudly echoed through the arena, securing a massive absolute statement-making win for the Indiana Fever. The entire manufactured narrative surrounding the WNBA season was instantly and permanently rewritten. The massive, logic-defying comeback wasn't just another simple tally added to the win column. It was a loud, undeniable, threatening message sent directly to every single coaching staff member and general manager in the professional league. The persistent, highly annoying rumors of an impending rookie wall were completely and utterly annihilated, instantly replaced by a deep, lingering, unspoken fear among opponents who now terrifyingly realized that even their absolute best-laid defensive plans could be easily dismantled in a single half of basketball. The toxic landscape of social media flipped entirely on its head with the exact same loudmouth critics who were ruthlessly laughing in the first quarter, completely deleting their embarrassing posts and scrambling wildly to find weak excuses for why the opposing defense completely collapsed. This specific legendary game definitively proved that Caitlin possessed an elite, almost highly dangerous level of basketball adaptability, uniquely able to rapidly process incredibly complex defensive traps in real time and physically execute the exact counters flawlessly without a second of hesitation. The post-game press conferences were instantly filled with stunned, highly muted reflections, with deeply frustrated opposing players violently forced to swallow the massive pride and publicly admit that the rookie was simply operating on an entirely different, untouchable level. The relentless media circus rapidly shifted from aggressively questioning her physical transition to the pros to legitimately asking if there was actually a ceiling to her immense, terrifying potential. It was a massive franchise-altering victory that deeply galvanized the entire Indiana locker room, permanently proving they could actively hang with the absolute best teams in the league if they just blindly trusted the generational talent leading the offensive charge. Ultimately, this deeply legendary, unforgettable performance will inevitably go down in the history books as the exact, precise moment the rest of the professional league realized the terrifying, undeniable truth about Caitlin Clark. Natalie Nakase and her widely respected defensive brilliance did absolutely everything right, perfectly executing a brilliant game plan that should have easily broken any normal, hyped-up rookie. But instead, it only served to violently wake up a highly motivated sleeping giant. The extreme hostility, the dirty physical hits, the hidden, highly toxic locker room, resentment, absolutely none of it matters when you can confidently step onto the court and casually drop a second half that completely redefines the geometry and future of the sport. Clark didn't just incredibly win a highly anticipated basketball game. She violently shattered the established, highly guarded hierarchy and definitively proved that no amount of veteran plotting or coaching genius can actively stop the inevitable evolution of the game. It leaves absolutely everyone wondering if the absolute greatest tactical minds in the entire sport simply can't figure out how to stop her when the lights are the brightest and the pressure is the heaviest. What exactly happens when she finally reaches her absolute terrifying peak? The entire WNBA is officially and permanently on notice. And the absolute most terrifying reality for the rest of the intensely competitive league is that Caitlin Clark is somehow unbelievably only just getting started.